2:28 p.m., August 28, 2003, Erie, Pennsylvania. The man walking into the PNC Bank doesn't look like a career criminal. He looks like a tourist who took a wrong turn. He's balding, middle-aged, wearing a generic t-shirt, and walking with a strange, uneven limp. In his right hand, he's clutching a wooden cane. He walks straight to the teller. There is no shouting, no everybody get down. He simply slides a piece of paper across the counter. The teller looks at the note. Then she looks at the man. Then she looks at his chest. The man lifts his t-shirt. Underneath the cotton isn't a handgun tucked into a waistband. It is a nightmare. A heavy, industrial metal box is clamped around his neck like an oversized shackle. It looks like something fabricated in a torture dungeon. There are wires running from the box to a battery pack, and right in the center, taped crudely to the metal, is a kitchen timer. The man, Brian Wells, speaks. His voice is eerily calm. He says, "I have a bomb on my neck. I need $250,000. I have 15 minutes. Now pause. Look at the security footage. Look at Brian's body language. He isn't sweating. He isn't shaking. He grabs a lollipop from the counter while the teller frantically stuffs a bag with cash. He's standing there with enough explosives to level the lobby, and he's behaving like a man waiting for a bus. Why? Because Brian Wells doesn't think he's robbing a bank. He thinks he's playing a game. He takes the bag. It's not $250,000. It's barely $8,000. But he doesn't argue. He turns around, cane in hand, and walks out the door. This is where the illusion breaks. As soon as he steps onto the asphalt, the parking lot floods with blue light. State troopers, the FBI. They don't rush him. They see the device on his neck, and they do the only thing they can do. They retreat. They take cover behind their cruisers, guns drawn, leaving Brian standing alone in the center of the lot. Brian sits cross-legged on the ground in front of a police cruiser, and this is the moment the game ends. You can see the shift in his eyes. He yells to the officers, pointing to the box on his chest. "It's gonna go off. I'm not lying. It's going to go off." The officers hold their line. They think it's a bluff. They think it's a fake device used to guarantee an escape. The bomb squad is stuck in traffic 3 miles away. 3:18 p.m. The kitchen timer on his chest hits 0. The explosion isn't a Hollywood fireball. It's a sharp, violent crack that echoes off the bank windows. The device punches a hole directly through Brian's chest. He falls backward. The cane drops from his hand. And when the bomb squad finally arrives, they examine that cane. It wasn't a walking stick. It was a fully functional, homemade shotgun, crafted to look like a piece of wood. Brian Wells was dead. The robber was eliminated. The case should have been closed. But when the coroner cut the clothes off the body, they found a stack of papers in his pocket. It wasn't a manifesto. It was a set of instructions. The explosion didn't end the mystery. It just started the clock on something much, much worse. See, most crimes are about chaos, a smash and grab, a drive-by. But the device locked onto Brian's neck wasn't chaos. It was engineering. It had a 3-band locking mechanism. It had dummy wires to fool a bomb tech. It was a puzzle designed by a genius. And the man wearing it wasn't the player. He was the pawn. Let's rewind the tape. 60 minutes. To understand why a man walks into a bank with a bomb, you have to understand the world he left behind. Brian Wells was 46 years old. He was a creature of absolute habit. He worked at Mamma Mia's Pizzeria. He drove a Geo Metro. He lived with 3 cats. He was the guy you called when you needed a shift covered. He was quiet, reliable, and entirely ordinary. 1:30 p.m. The phone rings at Mamma Mia's. The order is strange. 2 small pizzas. Delivery address, the transmission tower on Peach Street. Now look at the map of Erie. Peach Street is a main road, full of car dealerships and strip malls, but the transmission tower isn't on the street. It's at the end of a long gravel access road that cuts deep into a patch of dense woods. It is a dead end. There are no houses, no security cameras, no witnesses. It is a blind spot in the middle of the city. Brian takes the order. He doesn't question it. He loads the pizzas into his Geo Metro and drives out. We have a gap in the timeline here, a black hole. Brian turns his car onto that gravel road at roughly 2 p.m. He drives toward the tower. He gets out of his car. What happens in the next 20 minutes is the difference between a robbery and a conspiracy. When Brian walked into the tree line, he was a delivery driver. When he drove out, he was wearing the collar. The police initially thought Brian met a lone attacker, a jumper who overpowered him. But look at the crime scene photos of the mud near the tower. They didn't find one set of footprints wrestling with Brian. They found a frantic mess of tracks, big boots, sneakers, drag marks. Brian didn't walk into a mugging. He walked into a tribunal. At least 3, maybe 5 people were waiting for him in those woods. They had the collar ready. They had the shotgun cane ready. They had the timing scripted down to the second. This is the House of Cards moment. The police wanted to believe Brian was a victim of a random horrific attack. They wanted to believe a gang of strangers jumped a pizza guy. But there was a problem with the innocent victim theory. A problem that was sitting right there in Brian's car, written in black ink. The notes found in his pocket weren't just instructions on how to rob the bank. They were instructions on how to survive. They listed a series of locations, keys, and codes. It was a scavenger hunt. The note said that if Brian robbed the bank and followed the clues, he would find the key to unlock the collar. But if you took those notes and laid them over a map of the city, if you actually calculated the mileage and the speed limits, you'd realize the terrifying truth. The police thought Brian failed the game, but when they ran the simulation, they realized the game was never designed to be won. To understand why Brian Wells died, you have to stop looking at him as a human being. To the person who designed this crime, Brian wasn't a person. He was a component. He was a wetware processor executed to run a very specific, very lethal program. We need to look at the code. Police found 9 pages of handwritten notes in Brian's car. 9 pages. A normal bank robbery note is 5 words. Put the money in the bag. This was a manifesto. It was a terrifyingly complex algorithm written in black ink. I want you to look closely at the handwriting. Look at the pressure of the pen. It's not shaky. It's not hurried. The person who wrote this sat at a desk, likely with a ruler and a map, and engineered a sequence of events that had to happen with perfect precision. The notes didn't just tell Brian to rob the bank. They gave him a psychological protocol. Quote, "This is not a drill. There are men watching you. If you deviate from these instructions, you die." The system was designed to remove free will. It turned Brian into an automaton. Step 1, enter the bank. Step 2, get the money. Step 3, exit. But step 4 is where the robbery turns into a labyrinth. The instructions told Brian to drive out of the bank and head to the McDonald's nearby. Not to eat. He had to go to the drive-through sign. At the base of the sign, hidden under a rock, was a note. That note would give him a code. That code would lead him to a wooded area several miles away. In the woods, he would find a jar. In the jar, he would find a key. That key would unlock one of the collar's locks, buying him more time to find the next key. Do you see the mechanism? It's a Skinner box. It's behavioral conditioning. Do the task, get the reward, life. Fail the task, get the punishment, death. But here is where the forensic architecture reveals the lie. When the FBI eventually drove this route, when they actually put a car on the road and tried to replicate the system, they found a glitch in the math. This is the detail that proves this wasn't just a heist. The kitchen timer on Brian's neck was set for roughly 55 minutes. But when you calculate the drive time from the radio tower to the bank, to the McDonald's, to the woods, to the next location, when you account for traffic, red lights, running to the sign, finding the rock, reading the note, the total time required to complete the scavenger hunt was a minimum of 70 minutes. Let that sink in. 55 minutes on the clock, 70 minutes on the road. There was a negative 15-minute margin. Mathematically, Brian Wells was already dead before he even walked into the bank. The system was designed for him to win. It was designed to keep him busy until he exploded. Why? Why build a machine with so many moving parts if the goal is just to kill a guy? Because the complexity was the point. The mastermind wasn't trying to steal $8,000. He was trying to prove he was smarter than the FBI. He was building a Rube Goldberg machine out of human suffering. Let's look at the hardware, the device itself. When the bomb squad finally reconstructed the collar from the debris, they didn't find a bundle of dynamite taped together. They found a workshop marvel. The collar was hinged. It clamped around the neck like a giant handcuff. It was solid steel stock. It had 4 keyholes. It had wires running into a central box. But here is the split-screen reality. On the outside, visible to Brian and the bank tellers, it looked like high-tech military ordnance. But on the inside, the private truth. The wires were a mess. Some of them didn't connect to anything. They were dummy wires meant to confuse a bomb technician. The device was filled with BBs, metal pellets meant to act as shrapnel. And the timer? It wasn't a digital military detonator. It was a cheap kitchen timer you'd buy at a hardware store for $4. The contrast is sickening. A $4 timer controlling a human life. The builder of this device was a bricoleur, someone who builds complex things out of garbage. He used scrap metal, tape, and household items, but he assembled them with the skill of a machinist. This gives us a profile. We're not looking for a cartel. We're not looking for a terrorist cell. We're looking for a hoarder, a tinkerer, someone who spends 18 hours a day in a garage, obsessing over gears and levers, someone who thinks they're the smartest person in the room, but lives in squalor. The system relied on fear to keep Brian moving. The notes warned him, "We are watching you." This was the phantom variable. Brian believed he was under constant surveillance. He thought snipers were tracking his car. He thought if he stopped to pee, they would detonate the device remotely. But forensic tells us there was no receiver on the bomb. It was a simple timer. Once the pin was pulled, it was counting down. Nobody could stop it remotely. Nobody could start it remotely. The men watching him were a fiction, a ghost story invented to keep the rat running through the maze. But even the most perfect systems have a flaw. Complexity breeds chaos, and the mastermind made one critical error in his architecture. He assumed Brian Wells would be a perfect machine. He assumed he would drive fast, think clearly, and follow the script. But humans aren't machines. They panic. Back in the parking lot, the timeline was breaking. Brian got the money. He got to the car, but he didn't leave immediately. He hesitated. He ate a lollipop. He drove too slow. The police arrived before he could get to the McDonald's rock. The loop was broken. And this is where the cold, mechanical logic of the plan crashed into reality.
Brian is sitting on the asphalt. The police are shouting. The timer is ticking. In the mind of the architect, this was just a variable. If the subject is stopped, the subject is destroyed. But for Brian, this was the moment of realization. He was waiting for the watchers to intervene. He was waiting for the people who put the collar on him to call the police and say, "It's a drill," or to turn the timer off. He kept looking around the parking lot, scanning the crowd, looking for a familiar face, looking for the person who held the remote. He didn't know there was no remote. The system was grinding toward its inevitable conclusion. The gears were locking into place. The police were treating this as a standoff. They were following their protocol: contain and negotiate. The mastermind was following his protocol: silence the witness. And Brian? Brian was just the friction between those two systems. The timer hit the 1-minute mark. The beeping sped up. It was at this exact moment that the perfect crime started to look less like a robbery and more like a public execution. The police saw the device, they saw the wires, and for the first time they realized that the man sitting on the ground wasn't the threat. He was the weapon. But it was too late to cut the wire, because the system had already decided the outcome 55 minutes ago. He thought he had time. He thought if he just explained it, they would understand. But he forgot the first rule of the scavenger hunt. The game ends when the timer rings.
3:18 p.m. The timer hits 0. The sound isn't a beep, it's a crack. The collar detonates. Brian Wells falls back. The cane hits the pavement. The chest cavity is destroyed. The game is over. But the chaos is just starting. Panic. The bomb squad arrives 3 minutes too late. They check the body. They check the car. They find the notes. They seal the perimeter. Then, silence. Days pass. Then weeks. The investigation stalls. The FBI runs down 1,000 leads. Nothing fits. The notes are too weird. The bomb is too complex. The profile is a ghost. Then, the phone rings. September 20th, 1 month later. A man calls 911. His voice is shaky. He's breathless. He says, "I have a body in my freezer." The man is Bill Rothstein. He lives in a house on a hill right next to the radio tower where the collar was locked on to Brian. He's a brilliant, eccentric handyman, a hoarder, a man who bragged about being the smartest person in the room. Police swarm the house. They bypass the clutter. They bypass the tools. They go to the garage. They open the chest freezer. Inside is the frozen body of James Roden. Rothstein talks fast. He says he didn't kill him. He says a woman did it. He says he's just the cleaner. He's trying to cut a deal. He's trying to control the narrative. But the police aren't looking at the freezer anymore. They're looking at the desk. They find a suicide note written by Rothstein, but he isn't dead. They find tools, drills, metal shavings. They verify the handwriting. It looks familiar. The domino effect begins. Rothstein blames the woman. The woman blames Rothstein. They turn on each other like rats in a sinking ship. And in the middle of their screaming match, the truth about the pizza bomber finally spills out on the floor. It wasn't a kidnapping. It wasn't a random act of terror. It was a board meeting. Meet Marjorie Diehl-Armstrong, the woman Rothstein blamed, a former beauty queen, a brilliant master manipulator with a history of dead boyfriends. She was the queen bee. Rothstein was the builder.
And Brian Wells? This is the part that turns your stomach. This is the revelation that changes the victim into something else entirely. Witnesses place Brian at Rothstein's house the day before the robbery. They place him at the planning table. Brian Wells wasn't abducted by strangers. He was recruited by friends. He owed money to a crack dealer. Marjorie needed money to hire a hitman to kill her own father for his inheritance. Rothstein just wanted to prove he could build the perfect machine. They needed a driver. They needed a face. They pitched it to Brian as a guaranteed win, a fake bomb, a prop. He would walk in, scare the tellers, get the cash, and walk out. If he got caught, he'd play the victim. He'd point to the collar and say, "They made me do it." The police would let him go. He'd be the perfect mule. Brian agreed. He took the job. But he made a fatal calculation. He assumed there was honor among thieves. August 28th, 2 p.m. The dirt road by the tower. Brian drives up. He's ready. He gets out of the car to put on the prop. He sees Rothstein holding the collar, but something is wrong. He looks at the device. He sees the heavy locking mechanism. He sees the live wires. He realizes this isn't the prop they talked about. This is the real thing. He tries to back out. He runs. We know this because of the footprints, the struggle in the mud. The friends surround him. One holds him down at gunpoint. Rothstein snaps the heavy iron collar around his neck. Click. The lock engages. The timer starts. They hand him the cane gun. They hand him the notes. "Go," they say. "If you finish the hunt, you get the key." Brian Wells gets back in his car. Now, look at his face in the bank footage again. That eerie calm, that wasn't just shock. That was a man holding on to a shred of hope. He believed the lie. He believed that if he just played the game, if he just followed the rules his partners gave him, he would survive. He didn't know the game was rigged. He didn't know the scavenger hunt was impossible. He didn't know that the moment that collar clicked shut, he was already dead. Rothstein and Marjorie never planned to give him the key. He was a loose end, a disposable witness. The bomb was designed to kill him and destroy the evidence in one stroke. The betrayal is absolute. Brian sat in that parking lot, surrounded by police, waiting for his partners to save him. He thought the timer was a bluff. "It's going to go off," he screamed. He wasn't warning them. He was pleading with the universe. He was begging for the plan to be real. When the bomb detonated, it didn't just kill a man. It erased the link between the bank and the house on the hill. Or so they thought. The justice system is slow, but it is heavy. Bill Rothstein, the architect, the man who built the death machine, cheated the hangman. He died of lymphoma in 2004, before he could be fully prosecuted. He took his secrets to the grave, maintaining his innocence until the very end. The ultimate narcissist. Marjorie Diehl-Armstrong wasn't so lucky. She stood trial. Her defense was insanity. Her behavior in court was a spectacle, ranting, raving, a mind fractured by years of illness and evil. But the jury looked at the map. They looked at the timeline. They looked at the dead man. Guilty. Life in prison plus 30 years. She died in a cell in 2017. The rest of the conspirators, the drug dealer, the lookout, received varying sentences. The crew was dismantled. But the question remains, why? For $8,702, that was the total take. That was the price of a human life. Split 5 ways, it wouldn't have even paid for the gas they used to drive to the bank. The money was never the point. The point was the power, the ability to take a man, lock him in a cage of iron and fear, and watch him dance. Today, the radio tower is still there. The woods are quiet. The bank is still a bank. If you drive down Peach Street, past the McDonald's, past the strip malls, you can almost trace the route of the impossible ghost chase. People still debate the details. Was Brian 100% willing? Did he try to back out sooner? Did he really think the gun was a cane? But none of that matters now, because in the final seconds, sitting on that cold asphalt, Brian learned the only truth that matters in a game played by psychopaths. He thought he was the player. He thought he held the dice. But when the timer hit 0, he realized he wasn't playing the game at all. He was the board.